Okay, guys, we're starting page 41, a couple sentences down, in the middle of Hickory Lane. So let's begin. Okay. She held her hand out to Mabel, and the dog happily licked it, her tail wagging so fast I thought I felt a breeze. Regret bloomed in Jamie's pale eyes. Mabel's newly enrolled in an obedience class. Seems as though the first few classes haven't quite sunk in yet. Mostly she just sniffs the other dogs, Alice said with a shrug. I studied Glory top to toes, looking for anything that would reveal what was wrong with her, but nothing was glaringly apparent. My knack for first impressions hadn't prepared me for this. All I'd sensed from her was her loving spirit. Glory laughed. Mabel's a lover, aren't you, darling? Mabel's tail wagged as though she knew she was being praised, and she slobbered Glory's hands with kisses. She loves Big. Best to accept her as is instead of trying to change her. You don't want to go breaking her spirit. She loves Big. My breath caught at the words, so heartfelt that I knew immediately someone had once tried to break Glory's spirit. Maybe one day she'd share the details of her failed marriage with me. Even though it was none of my business, I wanted to learn everything I could about this woman. Her spirit is too big to let that happen, Cora B. said, her voice strained as though close to tears. Glory stepped over to her, patted her cheek lovingly. How long will you be on crutches, hon? I'm not sure yet. She didn't look too pleased about not knowing. It's broken. Glory gasped. No, I didn't see a cast, so I thought it was just sprained or tweaked. Cora B. pressed her lips together tightly, as if holding a whole lot of what she really wanted to say. The splint is temporary until Cora B. can see a specialist after the swelling goes down, Jamie explained. Fatigue creased Cora B.'s face, but she pulled her shoulders back, lifted her chin, and said, I'll make do. Of course you will, Glory said. Well, come on, let's get you inside to sit down and prop that foot up. You too, Jamie, Alice, and Mabel. I've just made lunch, and there's plenty. Jamie held up his hands. Thank you for the offer, Miss Glory, but we best get home. Alice looked like she wanted to argue, but thought better of it when her father gave his head a shake. Call if you need anything, Jamie said to Cora B. She nodded and said, I will. A lie. I lifted my eyebrow at how easily it had come out, without a trace of insincerity. Impressive. As the trio walked down the driveway, Glory threw her arms around Cora B., crutches and all. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, and the unexpected stab of envy I felt had me looking away, turning to study the police in the garden, still digging, still searching. My mama called, Cora B. said, about B. Glory pulled back. I'm real sorry for the shock that call must have given you. Shock is putting it mildly. It's all so... She shook her head. It's a mix of emotions is what it is. Sadness, but I'm also glad B's been found after all this time so we can lay her to rest right and proper. Mama also mentioned... Glory held up a hand the same way she had with Nanette earlier. I know what you're going to say, and I love you dearly. But I don't want to hear it. At the moment, Glory's earlier words drifted back to me. Through the haze of love, sometimes it's hard to see reason. Her denial of what was happening was born from love, pure and simple. Aunt Glory, Cora B. said on a sigh, let it be, honey. Now come on inside. She turned and immediately saw me standing there. Land's sake, she exclaimed as she tossed her hands in the air in exasperation. I've forgotten my manners. Emmy, I'm so sorry, hon. Come meet Cora B. I stepped forward into the sunlight, and Cora B. stared openly for a moment before she said, Wish you were visiting during a happier time, but welcome. I'm sorry about your grandmother. Glory sighed loudly. Cora B. nodded. Thank you. Her eyes were a light brown color that held flecks of green and a great amount of sadness. I wanted to write it off as expected because of what had happened to me, but this sadness went deeper. It haunted her. We all turned at the sound of approaching footsteps. An older man strolled forward, dressed in jeans and a short-sleeved dress shirt, a badge and gun clipped to his belt. A seasoned police detective was my guess. I tried not to fidget when his glance landed on me for a second longer than the others. Glory, you got a moment? He asked. Her jaw clenched for a fraction of a second, then resolutely loosened. Sure do, Bob. You girls go inside, sit down, eat. I'll be only a minute. I held open the door for Cora B, and she crouched inside, banging into the doorway, and I heard her curse under her breath. It was such a mild curse that I suspected she didn't curse often. After I pulled a chair out for her, she swiveled to sit, and her pink dress flared out before falling prettily against the chair legs. As she maneuvered, she dropped a crutch in the process. The bang echoed. As I picked it up and leaned it against the wall, she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were awash with moisture. The day's shocking turn of events, coupled with the frustration of her injury, were obviously taking a toll. I dragged another chair over so she could prop up her foot and push Glory's plate aside, out of the way. Crutches take some getting used to, I imagine. I've never used them myself. She settled her foot onto the seat cushion. Her toenails had been painted a light pink, and not a single one had chipped, despite the morning's ordeal with Mabel. Me neither, and I don't particularly want to be on them now. I sat down on the bench and stood up again. Are you hungry? Not really, thanks. Sweet tea? I can grab you a glass. Honestly, I'm a little queasy, partly from the foot pain, partially from everything that's happened today. It's been a lot. Understandable, I said. I sat back down, unsure what to do, what to say, and suddenly feeling more out of place than usual. I never really felt comfortable anywhere. Do you know much of what's going on? She finally asked. In the garden? I fiddled with the edge of a cloth napkin. I overheard some of the neighbors' gossip when I first arrived. Then Glory gave me the Cliff's Notes version of events of what happened in the 60s. As for what's going on today, she said she doesn't want to talk about it. I heard. Her forehead creased with dismay. A sinkhole. Who'd have thought? The last time a sinkhole opened up here, well, the last time that happened was the year Bee disappeared. I read about it in her journal, one of the few things we have left of hers. She took a deep breath and slowly shook her head as though unable to believe the coincidence. Even though Cora Bee wasn't much older than I was, I could tell that we'd had vastly different upbringings. She sat perfectly straight in the chair, not a hint of a slouch in her shoulders. Her skin was lovely, unmarred by violence. Her auburn hair was streaked with gold, which could have come from the sun, but I suspected it was at the expert hands of a skilled stylist. The loose bun at the nape of her neck was casual but elegant. Her makeup, even after the day she'd had, still looked flawless. Not a mascara smudge to be seen. She spoke evenly, clearly, and slowly, with perfect enunciation and articulation. So different from my clipped, brushed way of talking. My natural posture was atrocious, as I liked to curl up to disappear into myself most of the time. The only time I truly ever stood straight, shoulders back, chin up, was when I was walking alone, to give the illusion of confidence, to make myself seem bigger. A don't mess with me attitude that I'd been forced to adopt a long time ago. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. My hair was naturally blonde, and it had never been professionally cut. I favored loose pigtail braids and messy buns that were messier than most. I didn't wear makeup. Too much time in the sun had given my freckles a life of their own. The sound of my voice wasn't anywhere near cultured, but it was good enough for someone who lacked the proper education. My mama hadn't been a big believer in schooling, but she had been a big believer in libraries, mostly as a place to while away time, to use the internet, to meet people, even marks, the poor unsuspecting souls. For me, the library had been my Narnia, a magical place that took me away to another land where I learned more than I had ever hoped. Librarians instinctively took me under their wings, protecting me as much as they could from the evils inherent in my mother's way of life. Books had become my refuge, my only friends, my family, my escape from the everyday reality. Cora Bee finally said, You'll be working at the marketplace with Glory? I nodded. For 4 days a week, I'd be helping with her stall at the Sweetgrass Marketplace, which she called the Sweet Place for short. I'll likely need to find another part-time job as well if I ever want to get a place of my own. Her gaze held steady on me. How long do you plan on staying around these parts? I had the feeling she was asking more than the obvious, and I struggled with how to answer. Finally, I said, as long as y'all will have me. I was afraid A little of my heart had leaked out with that answer, so I quickly shifted my gaze to the wallpaper, where it skimmed across the bright flowers and mischievous rabbits and landed on one of the bees in the print. I swear I saw its wings flutter. I reached out to touch it, only to realize the bee was warm under my fingertip. "Do you like the wallpaper?" Corby asked. "Some people think it's too busy, too colorful, too much." I turned to face Corby. "It's not any of that. It's perfect." And though her eyes were tired, haunted, she smiled. "I think you'll fit in around here just fine, Emmy." And I smiled, too, because I knew she wasn't lying. Chapter 4. Glory's Garden Lesson Number 2. Take a look at these beauties, Emmy. Doesn't it seem like thin green stems won't be strong enough to hold its heavy flower cluster? But it is stronger than it looks. See all the tiny white flowers? There has to be at least 100 individual flowers in every cluster, each with 4 petals, and some are even tinted with pale pink dots, like they're trying to set themselves apart from the others. They're so pretty it's hard to believe they're even real. They're hydrangeas and are believed to represent heartfelt feelings, persistence, and thankfulness for being accepted. Let's snip a few and take them over to Nanette and May. It's their favorite flower. Cora B. Looks pretty as a picture. Glory stepped back from the queen-size bed and surveyed the guest room. Don't you think? I took stock of the room, which was freshly dusted and swept. The linens had been changed, the pillows fluffed. It looks wonderful. Thanks, Aunt Glory. This would have taken me hours on my own, maybe longer. I was struggling on the crutches, catching them on the edge of rugs, door frames, and table legs. I prayed my foot wouldn't require surgery, a possibility, or a cast, a possibility, and that I could get away with an air boot for the 6 to 8 weeks of healing the ER doctor had predicted. 6 to 8 weeks. Good heavens. And to think that at dinner earlier, I tried to decline Glory's offer to help get the guest room in order for my mother's arrival. Foolish of me, considering my predicament. But being Aunt Glory, she'd waved off my words with a flick of her hand in staccato. Nonsense. Emmy had offered to help too, but I turned down her offer with the broad excuse of how there wasn't enough to do for 3 people. At her look of dejection, I felt a swift, sharp stab of guilt, but hadn't changed my mind. I needed to figure out where to set my boundaries where she was concerned. The space closest to my heart had been closed off long ago, locking in those who were already housed inside and keeping out everyone else. It hadn't been an easy choice, but it was the only way I'd been able to move on with my life after my divorce, after my accident. Still, Emmy was family. Keeping her at a safe, emotional distance was going to be a challenge, especially when she lived right next door. Aunt Glory scooted in close to me. What's family for but to step in when you need a little help? She was forever stepping in, stepping up, shouldering the burdens of others without a thought to herself, her emotions. I envied that about her, how she made it look so easy to give herself, to give of herself. I knew it wasn't. I knew the risk. Speaking of, what did you think of Emmy? Knowing my great aunt, she'd been fit to burst with wanting to ask my opinion, but held off until our work was done. My thoughts went to Emmy, to her cautious eyes, her bitten fingernails, the scar on her cheek, and her galaxy of freckles. Her hard life, her painful life, floated around her in tiny black spots of ash, telling a story only I could see. But it was a story she'd lived. Her life had been steeped in pain and sadness. There were many colors floating around her, more than I usually saw with others. It was a juniper green that I was almost curious about. That specific color represented a secret, not just any old secret, a guilty one. She was hiding something she was ashamed of, which, considering the black floating around her, could mean just about anything. I've been able to see colors around people and objects my whole life long. Through my eyes, colors drifted around people like softly falling snow, offering glimpses of personalities. Floaters, I called them. It had taken me years to figure out the language of the colors and their meaning. Take Alice, for example. Orange floated around her, telling me of her playful, energetic personality. But after my car accident, other colors, secondary colors, had become sharper, clearer, louder. They were emotional colors and were nearly impossible to ignore. After Mabel had knocked me down around Alice, there had been sparks of dark plum remorse. Were you able to see her personality? Glory asked, her thin eyebrows raised high. Only close family knew how I could see color. It was too hard, too strange to explain to others. However, my abilities weren't the least bit odd to Glory, who knew where to plant a flower seed simply by looking at it, or to my mother, who had never been lost a day in her life because she instinctively knew which direction to go. We came from a long line of people who had enhanced intuitions connected to nature. I shook my head. This is the magic part. I love these books. I shook my head. Her innate personality is shrouded by darkness, and I can't see beyond that. Her breath caught. What color darkness? Through most of the time, I appreciated being able to see people's personalities. I often knew who to avoid at all costs. Sometimes it gave me more information than my soft heart could tolerate without breaking. Blackness, mostly. I let that sink in before I finally said, I'm glad she's here. I think she needs you. She needs us, she corrected. I won't be around forever. Carefully balancing on my crutches, I leaned into Aunt Glory and to her strength. I had no idea how I was going to live without her. She put an arm around me. It'll be okay, hun. You'll be okay, she said as if reading my mind. Promise? Because right now I couldn't see how. She nodded and smiled. Well, once you get used to Lillian being here. I groaned. You know, Glory said, you can always tell her what happened. It would take the weight off your shoulders. I shook my head. No one needs to know. I just haven't figured out how to keep her from seeing it for herself. How long could I hide myself, the person I'd become after that dark day 3 years ago, from her? A week? Maybe I could do it. It would take effort, but I could do it. Months, though? Aunt Glory tutted. Just take it day by day. She gave my cheek a peck and said, best I be getting back. It's been a long day and I'm ready to put my feet up. A long day was putting it mildly. It had been an emotional roller coaster. At dinner, Glory had once again declared to Emmy and me that until the forensic testing was completed, she would not tolerate talk of it having been B found in the garden. Plain as day, she stated that she refused to put her life on hold while we waited for an identification. Essentially, she was refusing to grieve. She'd been refusing for nearly 60 years now. As far as the coping mechanisms went, it had worked for her so far. But by denying what was so glaringly obvious to the rest of us, she was setting herself up for a hard fall. A hard, painful fall. One from which I wasn't sure she could recover. Not long after she left for home, my cell phone rang and I crutched as quickly as I could into the living room, where it sat charging on an end table. I sighed as I spotted my mother's name on the screen and answered. Aunt Glory's not picking up her phone, Mama said by the way of hello. Hold on, Mama. I put the phone down, then dropped onto the sofa, letting out a whoosh of breath as I landed heavily. My foot was throbbing. The ibuprofen I'd taken at the hospital had worn off, and I hadn't taken any of my prescription medication Jamie had insisted I fill before we left the hospital premises. Jamie, Mr. If I Were a Betting Man. It was a good thing I wasn't a gambler, or I might have lost my shirt. The sudden image of me losing that shirt in front of Jamie made me blush, and my cheeks suddenly fiery hot. I didn't have the wherewithal to dissect why my brain had decided to go there, so I pushed the images away, banishing them forever. I set aside the blasted crutches, then picked up the phone again. I'm back. Where'd you go? What was all that commotion? Where are you? I'm at home. I lifted my foot onto the large square tufted ottoman that served as a coffee table. As much as I didn't want to tell her about my injury, there would be no hiding it once she arrived, so I decided to get the worst over with. It's kind of a long story, Mama, but I broke my foot today. I winced, already knowing what her reaction would be. What? She cried. How? Why didn't you call me? Did you have another car accident? Oh, Lord. Mama, no. I tightened my jaw, then forced myself to relax. I fell, that's all. Are you okay? Are you in much pain? Are you in a cast? I looked around my living room, my gaze landing on the picture of my parents that sat proudly on one of the built-in bookshelves that flanked the fireplace. The photo had been taken 10 years ago at my wedding rehearsal dinner. They were facing each other, smiling as if sharing a private joke, and at the time I took the picture, I wished more than anything I'd have a marriage like theirs. I let my thoughts drift to my ex-husband Lucas for a moment before shaking them loose. No need to go there right now either, or ever again. I should really put the photo of my parents into an album out of sight, but I kept it out as a reminder that once in a while, if the stars aligned, true love was possible. And it was beautiful, even if it didn't happen for everyone. Mama went on, "Are you able to drive? I can call a car service to pick me up at the airport on Monday. I have an early flight out connecting through Houston. I'll be landing late. I'll send you the itinerary." "Mama," I said, "it's truly not necessary for you to come out right now. I know you don't really want to leave Daddy in the condition he's in. Plus, Bob Graham, you remember him, right? The police detective? He told Aunt Glory tonight they're done in the garden, but because the state crime lab is backlogged, it could be up to 6 months before we hear anything, before we can plan a funeral service. 6 months! Surely you don't want to put your life on hold for 6 months." 6 months does seem excessive, she finally agreed, but a month or two seems perfectly reasonable. I stifled a groan. "But Daddy..." "He'll be joining me there once he can fly, Corby. The Navy doesn't care where he finishes his medical leave. Now shall I call a car service for Monday?" Slumping with defeat, I said, "I'll be at the airport one way or another, Mama. Don't worry about that." "Now that we have that settled, tell me how supper went with the little con artist." Hold on. "Now that we have settled that, tell me how supper went with the little con artist." "Mama," every last bit of weariness I possessed came out in that one word. "Her name is Emmy, and dinner was fine. She seems scared. I don't think she's had a happy life." Emmy's fear had floated around her in shades of red. I'd been impressed that she'd mask it so well outwardly. Usually there was a telltale sign: fidgeting, twitching, twiddling of thumbs. But Emmy tended to sit stoically still, as if afraid of calling attention to herself. "Have you considered that she's playing the poor, pitiful victim, trying to get you to get on your good side? You didn't know Crystal Lee the same way I did, Corby. Apples don't fall far, young lady." It was hard to believe that my mother and Crystal Lee had once been friends, or rather my mother had considered Crystal Lee a friend. No, not a friend, family. Mama had considered her family, but it turned out my mother had simply been yet another pawn in Crystal Lee's game of life. I knew the feeling of being betrayed by someone I loved, someone I considered to be family, so I knew why my mama was currently acting the way she was. But taking her pain out on Emmy wasn't the least bit fair. "I saw the darkness around her with my own eyes, Mama, and besides, she's also Uncle Rowan's child. Even though Rowan was technically Mama's cousin, I'd always considered him an uncle, since he and Mama had been raised together like siblings." I waited for my mother to repeat the rumors that had circulated through our family and this community, that Emmy wasn't Uncle Rowan's child. Rumors that Crystal Lee had lied to him because she'd been looking for a sugar daddy and had run off when he asked for a DNA test. After meeting Emmy, I wasn't so sure those rumors were true. I quickly added, "Emmy has his freckles." I recalled how those freckles swept her cheeks and across her nose, glowing gold on her fair skin, glinting in the light like they had 1,000 secrets. "Is that so?" she said, a hint of softness in her voice. "They're mesmerizing, and so far, I can't find fault with Emmy. She's been the picture of kindness and friendliness." Mama sighed. "You need to be careful, Corby. You're too tender-hearted, always believing the best in people." I wanted to argue that compassion wasn't a bad trait, but I learned the hard way that wasn't true. I decided not to tell my mother about how Emmy had touched one of the bees on Aunt Glory's wallpaper and had felt how unique it was. The wonder on her face had been genuine. Mama would only try to explain the moment away, and I didn't want to hear it. So there's some more magic. This neighborhood was special, buzzing with charm, but not everyone could feel it, from flowers that sometimes bloomed out of season to the barely perceptible tremors underfoot to the gazing pool. Especially the gazing pool. Although almost everyone had heard tales of what the gazing pool had to offer, not everyone who sat on its stone ledge experienced its enchantment. It seemed to reveal itself only to those who truly felt a connection to nature. Did Emmy say where she's been all these years? Mama asked. Has she agreed to a DNA test? No, and I didn't ask on either count. Supper wasn't the place for an interrogation, especially not today. She said as though she believed otherwise. How's Aunt Gloria doing? She rushed through every one of my calls today. Were you able to help her see reason? Nanette said she tried and failed. I quickly explained that Aunt Gloria was unlikely to budge on the matter of Bee, at least not until the investigation was complete. Then I added, physically she's doing okay. A few slips of the tongue today. Her unsteady gait was a little more pronounced, but it always is when she's tired, and it's been an exhausting day. When's her next checkup? I swallowed hard, hating to lie. I'm not sure. I'll be glad to spend some time with her. I've missed her almost as much as I've missed you. We've missed you too, Mama. Perhaps a 6-month-long visit isn't unreasonable after all. I laughed because I hoped she was joking. I should get going, Mama. I have some work to get done tonight before I turn in. Some designs I want to finish up. And I have a big project on the horizon I should start prepping for. A shiver of excitement broke through the exhaustion of my day, reminding me how much I love my job, of how much my job had saved me. My job and Aunt Glory. Since there'd been enough tumult today, enough thoughts of Levi, I'd wait to tell my mother about the specifics of the Yardley contest until she was here in person. Talking about the Yardleys always meant thinking about Levi. They were forever linked. Work? But it's the weekend, Cora B. I fought a yawn. Is it? Don't sass. Why are you working at all? You should be taking time off to recuperate properly. Healing can't be rushed. You of all people know that. Besides, with you on medical leave, it'll give us more time to spend together. I'm more than happy to make calls on your behalf if you need me to. Your clients will understand if you take some time off. I broke out in a cold sweat at the mere thought of Mama's calling anyone. That's not necessary. Thank you, though. It's just my foot that's hurt, so I doubt it'll affect my design capabilities at all. Cora B., you're not going to be stubborn about this, are you? I heard the front porch door squeak open, then snap closed, and then the doorbell rang, saving me from answering my mother's loaded question. I really have to go. Someone's at the door. Bye. I hung up quickly and let my head drop back on the sofa cushion just as the person at the front door knocked softly on the doorframe. I threw a glance at my crutches and simply couldn't summon the energy to stand up. Come in, I shouted, knowing my voice would carry easily since the pine door stood ajar. I had tentatively looked inside. Cora B? Alice, come in, come in. I waved her inside. Is Mabel with you? Should I brace myself for kisses? No, she's home with Dad. Smiling, she stepped into the living room, carrying the basket I dropped off at her house last week, a bouquet of flowers in lingering plum-colored sparks. She was still feeling guilty about Mabel knocking me over. I brought back your basket, she said. It's full of cookies. I made them myself. My mom always tells me that you shouldn't return someone's basket or bowl or casserole dish empty. Do you like chocolate chip cookies? Love them, and that's good advice from your mother. My mother taught me the same. She thrust the flowers forward, and these are from Mabel. Mabel has good taste. They're beautiful, I said, taking the sleeve of flowers from her. Nestled inside layers of tissue paper was a small bouquet of pink hydrangeas, pink roses, and gardenias that smelled amazing. I pulled the note from its clip and opened it. It read, I'm sorry, woof woof. I smiled. Mabel might need obedience training, but it seems her etiquette is just fine. Please tell her thank you for me. Oh, I will. Should I put the flowers in a vase for you? No, but if you could put them on the kitchen counter for me, I'd appreciate it. I held the bouquet out to her. I can definitely do that. She took the flowers and hurried into the kitchen. A second later, she was back, and because those plum-colored wisps still colored the air around her, I added, why don't you come sit down and let me try one of those cookies? And that, it's halfway down page 56. And that is it for today. And I will see you guys tomorrow. And I hope you enjoy it. And What an amazing book so far, and the magic is just beginning. I know it, because these books are awesome. It's gonna get good. I will see you guys soon. Bye.